Told you before, this land is not for sale. Ah!
They said it was just business, but for one man, it was the theft of a lifetime. 1,500 acres, his family's pride, his legacy, vanished overnight, sold off by those who thought he was powerless. They didn't expect he'd fight back and win in a way that would shake their entire community. This isn't just about stolen land. It's about a system that thought it could bury him. But what happens when the man they underestimated turns the law against them? Stay with me, because this revenge was decades in the making. For most of his life, Robert Daniels knew every inch of his family's land. Rolling fields that stretched farther than the eye could see, oak trees older than his grandparents, and soil rich with stories passed down for generations. It wasn't just property, it was heritage, built through sweat, sacrifice, and the quiet pride of ownership in a world that didn't make it easy for a black man to hold on to anything. Robert's days were simple but full, mending fences, tending crops, and teaching his son how to work the land just as his father had taught him. It was the kind of life where you measured wealth in sunrises and harvests, not in bank accounts. But beyond the fences, there were whispers. People in town talking about new plans for the area, strangers asking questions they had no business asking. And then there was the letter, a neatly folded piece of paper that would change everything. Robert didn't know it yet, but forces far bigger than him were already moving. Plans were being drawn, deals were being made, and his 1,500 acres were at the center of it all. The question wasn't if they'd come for his land, it was when. It started with the county meeting, a gathering Robert wasn't even invited to, but whose decisions would change his life forever. He heard about it from a neighbor. The HOA was pushing a redevelopment plan for the area, promising progress and new opportunities. But Robert knew what that meant. Progress for some, displacement for others. A week later, he came home to find a sign hammered into the edge of his property. Sold. No phone call, no warning, no chance to fight. The land that had been in his family for over a century was now listed under a corporation's name he had never heard before. When he confronted the HOA president, a man with a tight smile and colder eyes, he was told it was all perfectly legal. They claimed unpaid community fees, fabricated debts Robert had never owed, and invoked obscure bylaws written decades earlier, rules designed to target families like his. The worst part wasn't just the theft. It was the way they looked at him, as if he was powerless, as if his history, his legacy, meant nothing. Robert tried to fight. He filed complaints, hired a lawyer, and gathered every scrap of paper proving his ownership. But doors closed quickly in a town where the HOA's influence ran deep. Some of his friends warned him to drop it. You can't win against them. Others told him stories of people who tried us and lost everything. One afternoon, he drove past his fields and saw surveyors walking the land, marking it with bright, orange flags. Each flag felt like a wound, another piece of his life being carved away. The final blow came in the form of a court order, granting the HOA full possession. By then, the media had barely noticed. Just another property dispute, buried in the local section. But Robert wasn't done. If they could twist the law to take from him, then he could use the law to take from them. He spent months digging through public records, tracking every transaction, every backroom deal, every questionable sale connected to the HOA. And then he found it, a loophole buried in the very same bylaws they had used against him. It wasn't enough to get his land back, but it was enough to buy something they cared about even more. Houses. Their houses. Robert began quietly acquiring the HOA board members' properties one by one, using shell companies and strategic bids. They didn't notice at first, until eviction notices started showing up in their mailboxes. By the time they realized what had happened, it was too late. But Robert wasn't finished. He had one last move to make, and it would be the one they'd never forget. It was the annual HOA meeting, packed with board members, investors, and the same smug faces that had signed away his family's legacy. Robert walked in quietly, unnoticed at first. He wasn't there to plead. He wasn't there to ask. When they reached the agenda item about property updates, Robert stood. In his hand were thick stacks of official documents, titles, deeds, and contracts. With calm precision, he placed them on the table. "These," he said, his voice steady but cutting through the room, "are the homes you live in, the homes you've built your lives around. And as of last month, I own them." The room fell, silent. At first, they laughed. Then they read. One by one, the smiles faded. The HOA president's face drained of color as he realized every word was true. Robert had used the very bylaws they'd weaponized against him, turning their own system into the trap they couldn't escape. One woman whispered, "This can't be legal." Robert's reply was almost a mirror of what they'd told him months before. "It's perfectly legal." A wave of murmurs broke into shouts, threats, even desperation. But Robert didn't flinch. He told them they had 30 days to vacate, the same time frame they'd once given him. In that moment, the power shift was absolute. The man they'd underestimated, dismissed, ignored, and disrespected, was now the one holding the pen that decided their fate. But as Robert turned to leave, he knew this wasn't just revenge. It was a message to every system that thrived on exploitation. To every person who thought they could take without consequence. And he still had one final choice to make. Robert could have thrown them out without a second thought. He had every legal right, every ounce of justification, and for a while, that's exactly what he planned to do. But as the days passed, he realized something. Winning back dignity didn't always mean taking everything from those who wronged you. Sometimes the real victory was proving they couldn't break you. In the end, Robert gave them a choice. Pay fair market value for the homes and a public acknowledgement of their wrongdoing, or leave. Most took the deal. Some left town in shame. Either way, the balance of power had shifted forever. But for Robert, it wasn't about the houses. It was about showing that a black man could stand toe-to-toe with a system built to keep him down and win on his own terms. His story spread beyond the county lines, sparking conversations in communities that had long ignored similar injustices. People began digging into their own HOA policies, questioning bylaws that had gone unchallenged for decades. This wasn't just Robert's victory. It was a blueprint, a reminder that knowledge, persistence, and courage can turn the tables, even when the odds seem impossible, because the truth is, his 1,500 acres may be gone forever. But the legacy of his fight will outlast any plot of land. So the question is, how many more Robert Daniels are out there right now being silenced, stripped, or pushed aside? And when their moment comes, will we stand with them, or let the system win again?